Hello, and welcome to Wonkette Weekend Live Chat, where we definitely know what time it is in the area where we are. I am Robin Panacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
Hello, Robin. Hello, everyone. My wife is probably no longer listening, so I'm just going to jump right in. Um,
Don't be, I look. Sometimes I don't know what time it is. Okay, and I think I'm on the East Coast, but I'm in the Midwest. I keep going
uh,
back and forth. It was bound to happen someday.
there are probably more forgiving podcast listener viewers than my wife, but she's always inspired me to jump right in. So Donald Trump became the first president in history to have his own mugshot this week. And though I should clarify, of course, past presidents, there were no camera technology. So he's hoping to get that asterisk in his consideration. So um, the Republican response to this has been interesting. I found where Ted Cruz, who, according to his good buddy Trump, his wife is ugly and all sorts of stuff, and his dad killed JFK, but he's been defending Trump by saying that Biden has this banana republic where he's prosecuting his political opponent. And Republicans keep saying this because it's sort of this is the only time that a former president and a sitting president's political opponent has been indicted, which
Yeah,
so the problem is Biden and not Trump. It's a
yeah.
fascinating sort of double
So,
speak
like,
there.
therefore, because he's someone's political opponent, he should have been able to do all the crimes he wanted.
Yes, his crimes are it's fascinating because his crimes are he's currently going for everything. I did it, but it was fine. Which, if you've watched A Few Good Men, is not actually you admit to the code red and get all huffy. They still arrest you at the end, even if you're Jack Nicholson. So that is not actually a relevant defense. Like people make a lot of hay over O.J. Simpson apparently getting away with murder, so to speak, and he did not actually say I killed her and she deserved it. He claimed that.
No, he said, if I did it, here's how I would have done it.
Uh, so I want to play, though some of the response to his mugshot has been
Yes.
nuts. So I want to play this from Jesse Waters. It's hilarious.
I am now going to book the Fulton County photographer for my Christmas card. Because, Judge, and I say this with a unblemished record of heterosexuality, he looks good. And he looks hard. And
he looks hard, Robin. So I'm
That is not what she said, I assume, ever, probably.
imagine being so pathetic that you will talk about how hot Donald Trump is on live television, but want to make sure that no one thinks you're gay, because
Yeah,
that's what's embarrassing, not
yeah.
the fact that you think. And of the
Trump
gay
looks hot
people
in
in
his
general.
mugshot, no homo.
Yeah, I don't know how well Trump would do at a gay bar. Gay men probably have far better taste than
Well,
Trump, who is repulsive.
I would
And
say literally any bar where people don't know he's like a rich guy or, supposedly a rich guy. Or who's
yes, if
like,
yes, if he's going somewhere other than I'm going to take your kidney bar,
yeah.
uh, that not would probably, though the aesthetics of his mugshot,
Yeah.
for me, I've always said, and there was a Showtime series or film rather with Jeff Daniels as James Comey, and they'd cast someone as Trump who really I felt conveyed his sort of repulsiveness, like his sort of almost like a
Oh,
horrible
I love him. The guy from that Stephen King miniseries with the guy who communicate with machines. I can't think of his name.
hmm.
He's Irish. Sorry. Like, no, I know who he is. I know who he is. I really like this one series.
but
Um,
but you don't, Blanche. You don't know who he is.
I do. I do.
That is
I'm sorry.
I am fairly ruthless. Again, I've joked about this with Robin of like in my corporate days, to be in a meeting with me would be subject to things like that. Of like, I would ask certain things that someone would like get, and I would be like, "No, okay, you don't know," and then I would move on. Sorry.
Oh my
So,
God.
but he
The guy
is.
with Mr. Mercedes.
There you go. Well
I don't know his actual name. I don't know anyone's actual name. I'm like the guy from this thing.
yes, the something play from there's a lady who did that in the film Rope. She would always refer to something as it was the something from something. And then uh but he his grotesqueness was something that I feel is part of like his Trump, like, and of course Trump supporters love that about him. They find that
Yeah.
intoxicating. I believe Jesse Waters is true. And yes, you're not, I'm sure you're not gay. Don't worry. Not with that tie. But he has that's what he conveys and what most decent people find repulsive. So when I say Trump is repulsive, that is what I mean. Like sort of
Yeah.
his kind of, not the fact that he might be a man who's 77 years old and weighs more than other people. I just really the sort of intense obsession with Trump's weight from a lot of people is very disturbing to
Yeah.
me,
No.
especially because there was tons, and Rachel Maddow was talking about it, and lots of people talking about like he had listed his weight on his mugshot or whenever his official paperwork or whatever, and he's 6'3", 215 pounds. Everyone went crazy about it. Oh, he's lying and lying. It's like, well, that's not the relevant lie.
Yeah.
And you don't know that is a lie, because I want to also clarify, people do not know how the human body works. I found over history, I found like the idea of where there's an expectation. If you watch old movies, whenever a woman would
Mhm.
give her weight, it always had to be like 105 pounds. And I remember a friend of mine, she was saying how she was surprised that men have no idea that breasts have mass.
Oh yeah. No. Doctors don't either. Honestly, they're like,
And the comparisons of Trump to um celebrity like Chris Hemsworth or football stars who are also have
yeah.
been listed as being around the same height and weight seem to also ignore that mass is different in different parts of your body. So
Yeah.
I could probably list my weight and someone would be horrified and say I'm lying because a football star who's my same height or whatever, slightly larger, might weigh the same or even a little bit more, but it's like the body is just
Yeah.
different of where the weight is.
Also,
Um,
muscle weighs more than fat, and he's not especially muscular. But at the same time, the thing that really does bother me is when people very much seem to be using it as like, oh, this is my freebie, this is my get out of jail free card to be shitty to fat people. Like that's really like
oh
what
yes,
it is. Like, okay, I know we're not supposed to do that because we're politically correct now, but because it's about Donald Trump, I can now be super gross and an asshole about that kind of thing. And I do not actually feel like that gives anyone a pass.
no, I mean I think as mutual friend of ours had pointed, like you are saying more about your friends who are heavy
Yeah.
than you are about Trump, um, and especially the extent that you find Trump grotesque is very telling. If you
Yeah.
find his weight grotesque, it's very telling of what you actually think about other people. It's
Yeah,
more of a,
exactly.
we don't accept you. We're just sort of giving you a pass because this person. But when we don't like you, we will
Yeah.
admit how terrible you look and everything. It is, but it's a ridiculous sort of thing to fixate on, given the more relevant fact of his lies and his um, and what he's actually focused on. I did find it amusing that he was described his hair color was self-reported as strawberry blonde.
That's always been the case. That has always been the case. I've never like it's he's been saying that since forever. It's been listed that way since forever. I have no idea why it's clearly not, but maybe I also am not 100% sure that I understand what strawberry blonde hair is. Like,
I don't. I just want to.
I've always assumed it was like really light red, but I don't know.
But I just not to because Jesse Waters is all
Yeah.
afraid of being labeled as gay. My understanding is that was not how men like. Either he was red or blonde or brown. Strawberry. Like it sounded like a Sweet Valley High description of.
No, I mean, it is a real hair color. I just have never really been clear on what it is.
It just seemed like
Women. It is like
women are described by food colors, like
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Chocolate skin, strawberry, hair, peaches and cream complexion. That was Betty Cooper and the Archie comics. He was always apparently having a peaches and cream. I don't understand even what that looks like.
Oh, you know what? I'm looking at strawberry blonde now, and he is technically a strawberry blonde.
Okay, well, yeah, very technical. I presume with a lot of help. But it seemed as if he had been graying recently. Had I missed that? Like most photos I'd seen.
I'm sure he's already graying. I'm sure he dyes
it. Yes, but I'm saying
right?
Had allowed himself to go gray. It seemed like there was some shot. That's probably like sun or whatever. So, but it looked as if. So last week was the Republican primary debates, and it was the day before he's about to get mugshot, and his opponents are incapable of, other than say Chris Christie, of actually hitting him on the fact that he is potentially going to become a convicted felon, to the point where they were asked, would you still support him if convicted? And all of them except Christie and I believe Isaac Hutchinson said, well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And DeSantis did the worst of both. He was not immediately in a Trump camp. He just sort of looked around and saw that everyone else was going to support me. And then he meekly put his hand up. So don't they understand why they keep losing, Robin? Which is that Trump is very clear. And this goes back to 2015 when he had a stupid pledge. So he's been very clear that if I am not the nominee, my supporters will stay home, up and down the ballot. It'll be a wipeout. And only way you could possibly win is with me. And so all these geniuses said last week was, you're right. We will inevitably wind up supporting Trump. So it's not like he will lose us and our supporters, how few they are. And so you might as well stick with him. It doesn't mean anything. And so they keep having this magical thinking of hoping that Trump will go away by himself.
Well, because what they think is going to happen, I assume, is either that he's not for some reason they're not going to elect him, or it'll be a legal thing where it's like, oh, he literally cannot run because of this. And so therefore his voters will be forced to choose someone else.
Yeah, there's no legal. I don't think there is any sort of legal. And again, it comes to Republicans having to do something. So either say don't vote for the convicted felon, or being a part of the decision making in a Republican run state to not allow him, a convicted felon, on the ballot, and to come out and say that. So, Gavin Newsom has said like he thinks Trump shouldn't be on the ballot because he tried to overturn democracy. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
But no Republican really care. They can win without California. So it's an empty gesture. It has to be these states that are swing states. So from like Arizona or Michigan or whatever. And we have a Democratic governor in Arizona, so that could possibly happen. But, it all falls to Democrats to sort of do this. And then that would lead to violence even more so. If Republicans are like, there's no scenario where you can just say, oh, well, vote for me because the Democrats won't let Trump on the ballot. They want them to fight for Trump.
Yeah, well, they want them to, appear to have his back and because really, like, it's very much about loyalty. It's very much about, like, you don't go against the family, and Trump is like the head of the family, and so therefore you're not supposed to, you're supposed to act as if like he is like, almost like a religious figure to some degree. One thing that I found rather interesting, I don't know if you saw the Newt Gingrich article I sent to our chat. Um, According to a bunch of white people, white Republicans, who really loves Donald Trump now post mugshot is black men. And I was wondering if you would perhaps like to weigh in on your newfound great love of our former president.
Yes, because black people are criminals inherently.
That was literally the gist of it.
We can't help loving a criminal. He's now our Tupac,
Yeah.
as
No, they did.
Denise
There was,
D'Souza said,
yeah.
which not
They're like,
getting.
he's Tupac now.
So the reason, as Chuck D said, that most of our heroes don't appear in those stamps, that they were fight like we do recognize the difference between freedom fighter Nelson Mandela and racist scumbag
Yeah.
Trump, and I think we've never been one to support actual criminals. We don't,
Yeah.
I going back to the fact this gentleman or person that said, I don't think it's fat shame. I think it's his unfailing preening vanity that people are mocking. I'm all for mocking vanity, but in this case, I think what you're getting at is why would someone lie about their weight? Because we live in a culture where the numbers have some value to your humanity that doesn't mean anything, and it is sort of what you're going at is something arguably that's humanizing, that he does something that a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people fear going to the doctor. A lot of people do not get medical treatment they need to get because they don't want to go and be shamed. Yeah, and they don't go. They
like, oh, I don't want to get weighed. It's that doctors are actively shitty to fat people. Like,
yeah, and that is keeping them from getting health care. They don't feel well. It could be any number of things. They know that one, they're going to go. They're going to get yelled at for being overweight, and told that everything wrong can be fixed by just losing weight, including like they could be missing an arm or something, and they say, well, just lose weight. So I
literally went in to get like ADHD meds once, like, because that was like what my main thing that I needed. I had to switch doctors because my insurance, I had like terrible Cobra insurance, had to go to this thing. And the doctor was like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to treat you for anything until you get on my official like weight loss diet plan. Like, it was completely insane. So like, there are reasons, but also this is the thing, like there's the disgust reaction, and like I think that people can't necessarily, when people have an automatic like disgust reaction to anything, and like you'll see it like the way people talk about trans people, the way that people talk about gay people, when they're trying to be like, I'm doing constructive criticism, but you can still tell that like disgust level is there.
Mm-hmm.
That like disgust reaction, and that becomes very like, honestly, I can see it like when there are men who are like, oh, now I get to be really sexist because I'm talking about Kellyanne Conway. This is like my moment where it's okay and I get my pass on this. And there's people can tell, like, it's people can tell.
Well, yeah, and it's sort of the idea by comparing him to what is seen as his physical betters.
Yeah.
So Chris Hemsworth or whatever. It's not just some other random person who is 6'3" and 215 pounds. It is sort of like, how dare you imagine yourself to be like these gods that we worship, even though no one understands how weight works. No one even knows if it's true. Whereas there are lies that are clearly like, he didn't win Georgia. That we know objectively to be false. That he did not win. He's lying about that, as opposed to his height and weight. And again, how do you know what someone weighs? I think also there's that sense of no, we wanted a figure. And there were people taking bets on this prior. Like, what's the over under of his weight? Because they just felt it was a number to mock and ridicule. So it's one thing of like, what you're saying is that something about someone who's not Donald Trump is something so horrible that they live with every day, is something so horrible and repugnant they can't wait to make fun of it about someone they hate, which is a scuzzy thing. I mean, again, if you're someone who is 300 pounds, it just means like, oh, you think I'm horrible and my existence is so shameful. You want to relish that about someone you loathe, which is not a particularly cool thing to do, I think, when he's actually a criminal. I think Michael, our colleague Michael, had talked about people commenting on cinema's clothing, and I think she has tried to do the whole thing of that's being sexist. I think clothing is and it's fashion, it is art, and if you're in the business of criticizing art, I think it's also different from someone who, when they used to have the people at Walmart, which I found loathsome, there was like and you're essentially making fun of poor people. But I don't know, like, if you're
no, she's spending a lot of money on clothes. Like, I know what she's wearing and it's expensive. Like,
yes. And so sort of mocking that to me is about preening vanity and being absurd and ridiculous. Trey Gowdy, who's often dressed like a Batman villain, and Matt Getz, who dresses like Herb Tarlick from WKRP in Cincinnati, like a used car salesman, is very that I get. But the weight obsession with Trump has kind of always been a sort of thing, especially I remember Nancy Pelosi doing her winking thing about being concerned about his weight. It's like, well, no, you're not concerned. You don't care.
No. Especially because people do link, in America especially, and probably everywhere else as well, they do link like weight with like personal morality.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, especially in America, because we link everything with personal morality, like in general. So that has nothing to do with actual personal morality. But I don't. Yeah, it's just, it's there's an extra layer to that. That's like, oh, well, this is part of why he's bad, and no, it's not part of why he's bad.
Like, I have never made a dick joke.
Neither have I. Like,
Wonkette.
That's like, some people here, we have different styles. I'm sure that you guys have noticed. And no, I don't make dick. I actually don't like vulgarity very much. Like, I'll swear I don't like vulgar jokes. That's just actually like a personal thing of mine. I'm rather prim. Actually, Rebecca, like, often she's like, well, Robin's very prim, and it's true. I am. I kind of am, as far as certain things go.
Yes, you will.
I'm from New England, bitches.
Yeah, I very rarely use non-PG rated language. It's very, very rare, and if you've found it, it's obviously been added after the fact. But it's very rare that I do that. And even here, my dad listens to this, so I try not to. I watch my mouth.
I usually only swear in Italian. I do. I'm used to it. Like, it's like, that's actually like a cultural thing. Like, that's how you learn Italian as a child, is by your relatives swearing in front of you.
Yeah, I agree with Darren Simmons about this. About he had just posted about people criticizing Ben Shapiro for the pitch and timbre of his voice. I will say, it was weird when he was doing his Barbie diatribe, his rant against Barbie, and he, of course, attacked a trans actor who's in Barbie. And it's like, oh, they have this trans actor, and he, of course, misgenders her, but he says, and her voice is deeper than mine, which, as I said, is one of those things that, like,
and my voice is deeper than Ben Shapiro's.
It was
like,
it was one of those things where I almost like, okay, this has to be an act. It's impossible to have that degree of lack of self-awareness. This has to be a comedic bit. And I almost like, I couldn't like maybe I'm not getting, maybe Ben Shapiro has been fooling us all along. But yes, he seems to apparently judge. I don't know. I mean, I like deep voices in women. Like I don't
Thank
understand.
you.
I never got.
I'm very I used to be very insecure about it when I was younger. Um Largely when I would answer the phone and someone would say hello, sir. But like, both my sister and I made our voices higher than they are naturally. I probably still do make it higher. Just inadvertently. I've been trying to do better. Although when we first started this, one of the first comments that we got was, I didn't expect Robin's voice to be so deep. And like in my mind, I'm like, I
What
thought he was
what do
doing that.
they what do they
Like
expect?
a weird childhood thing where I'm like, no. And then I'm like, what the fuck do I care? No, I'm Kathleen Turner. It's great. Um, but I think he does invite that in. I'm not Allow me to finish before I said because he is constantly talking about masculinity and how fabulously masculine he is, and so it feels like, oh, especially since he's just about as into musical theater as I am. Have you ever heard this man try and sing Stars? It's not great,
Mhm.
but from this, he's so obsessed with and his other people are like, oh, no one's letting us be our great manly selves. And I'm like, no one told you to talk like that. But, and so there's this urge to, point out, hey, you're not being this paragon of, standard machismo and masculinity that you think you are.
Mhm.
Um, at the same time, though, I can see how that's going to make men who do not naturally have, voices as deep as mine, like people who aren't Barry White, feel some kind of way, because I do know that is a thing that men feel insecure about. And that's not okay either, because the timbre of your voice really shouldn't be a reflection of your, masculinity or femininity to begin with.
Yes, those are all those kind of it's very interesting because it's sort of, well, what if Trump was still Trump but like gorgeous? Because that's always, they would used to do these things where they would compare Trump to Barack Obama, or have when Obama's topless or something.
Yeah.
And Obama, yes, he's a handsome
Yeah.
guy,
No, Obama's hot. Like, there's
but
no,
it's
yeah.
just like, okay, well, what if Trump did look like Obama, like, or it's like the old 60s show where he switches bodies with Obama or something. Like, isn't he still evil? Is that like becomes harder for us to get past? I mean, granted, culturally, we have this idea that evil is has to look,
Unattractive. Yeah.
a certain way. I mean, there were some. I mean, I think Disney villains would sometimes put that on its head, because the evil queen is gorgeous, but her vanity is, of course, her core evil trait. But there's this sense of what is evil is unattractive, and so Trump is
Yeah.
inherently evil, and so he has to be all this foul, disgusting stuff. But yes, to me, it's like a guy who's concerned about how he looks, even despite all the stuff, the machismo that he presents, is actually humanizing. He has very few humanizing traits, and so
Yeah.
if you are trying to write this character, having him feel self-conscious about
Yeah.
anything is one of the few ways to enter into the character without being sort of two-dimensionally completely evil. And he is. We didn't get enough time to discuss Giuliani's mugshot. I didn't take a copy of it, but Giuliani also, I do think that, I mean, Fannie Willis has done so much for Black people,
Yes.
bringing Rudy Giuliani to some degree of justice, because he will probably
Higher RICO charges, and that's for my people as well. That was a bad self-deprecating joke. The fact that he's being charged with RICO charges is somewhat, delightfully ironic, considering he made his bones pursuing RICO charges against the mob.
Yes,
Like,
and Trump is a mobster. His whole setup is very mob-like. Jamie Lynn Cross and I discussed that when she was on the show, was like he's very clearly like a mob guy. Everything he does, his conversation with Raffensperger, his veiled threats. But I mean, I just love, again, I want to go back.
Fictionalized, like a fictionalized, sorry.
Oh, well, I mean, fictionalized mobsters are actually entertaining. I mean, I guess he's more maybe like a Goodfellas mobster. Like that was the answer, because Coppola's Godfather was a bit too Shakespearean and almost a sense of nobility, and Trump has none. And so the guys in Goodfellas were just complete scumbags. So that's sort of who Trump is. But yes, I'm very pleased that he has gotten his comeuppance. He's gonna die broke and potentially in prison. I don't think there's much effort to try to wig the wheels of justice to protect Giuliani. And same with like people who will probably end up flipping, like Jenna Ellis, who has nothing to offer.
Well, because they all turned on her now, so like she's not getting the protection. she went against them, so.
Yes, I mean, most fictional villains are queer coded. I mean, I think one of the reasons we find, this was for someone, that we find a lot of villains in movies more interesting than the heroes is because the coding is that they are a rejection. I've had queer friends go into greater detail on this. There's sort of a rejection of very rigid heterosexual society, and they are sort of fighting against that in its own way. And I mean, obviously that's,
and they often have better outfits. And in the case of the Misfits from Gem and the Holograms, as we discussed with my friend Aja, their songs were in fact better.
Yes, they were going to get her.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we all like being bad, but it's always sort of the villains were often punching up. They were sometimes outsiders in a way. I think even Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty, she's snubbed.
Loved Maleficent.
She is, not invited to a party, which I think people can identify with.
Well, a lot of, I mean, this is going off on a tangent, but a lot of the female villains in general are always like evil for, what men consider like stereotypical female things. Like, oh, they're jealous of her for being pretty, or they're jealous of, her for some other reason that is, like, oh, I wasn't invited to a party, I'm going to ruin your life. Which I think is very like, there's, especially like in old fairy tales and everything, there aren't usually like, good reasons for women to attack, except weirdly in or attack, become evil or whatever. Weirdly in murder ballads, a lot of the time, like when there are female villains, they're like, they actually have like a pretty decent point. Like Team Barbara Allen forever, personally. But like it's these very shallow ways that women become villains in a lot of, classic literature and fairy tales. So it's just my.
Yeah. There was someone who was, had commented about 101 Dalmatians, the Glenn Close version. And, oh, yes.
I haven't seen it, but I would check it out. So.
Oh, Crip Dyke was referring to the Harley Quinn TV series, which is actually touches a sore point with me. The great Arlene Sorkin. The great Arlene Sorkin passed away. So she created the character of Harley Quinn, and who was essentially based very much on her comedic persona. And I was a big fan of Arlene Sorkin's before. I remember being a teenager and recognizing her voice immediately when I watched the first episode of Harley Quinn. But she was on Days of Our Lives as Calliope Bradford, and her boyfriend, her husband soon, was Eugene Bradford, played by the great John Delancey, who would later
was that pre-Marlena being possessed?
Pre what? I'm sorry?
Like before Marlena was possessed? Because
well before. This was like
I only started watching like
80s.
when Marlena got possessed and then drifted off. Sorry. Like
this was very early 80s, early mid 80s, and then she had left the show probably by the time that you're referring to.
Gotcha.
But she's great, and yeah, everyone and everything is doing is sort of based on. She was doing a lot of, in her original kind of comedic personality in many ways, sort of a riff on Judy Holliday from the film Born Yesterday, but she sort of made it her own thing. And I think later actors from Margot Robbie to Kaylee Coco, who's still playing her on the TV series, they all are doing variations of her. So yes, Marlena's possession by the devil was well after. I think I.
Oh, wait, did she talk like this?
Yes.
Like in the full-on Judy Holliday voice?
Yeah. And I think versions of Harley Quinn have sort of gone in a different direction. They're doing more of I would say more Fran Drescher, sort of a sort of Jersey girl thing, the more of like the Fran Drescher style voice without kind of understanding where Arlene Sorkin was coming from. And
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, I think there was an actual episode of the cartoon where the Joker ditches Harley, like she's in jail. He doesn't bother bailing her out, so instead he thinks it's easier to just replace her, sort of like a studio executive replacing actors. So he auditions for a new henchwoman, and one of them he calls Fake Harley is voiced by Maggie Wheeler, who then was playing Janice on Friends. So she would do Harley Quinn as Janice from Friends, which is weirdly enough how most people doing Harley Quinn, I think most actors since then, are doing more Janice than Judy Holliday. So, but back to politics. But yes, Kryptonite depressed me. So now I will try to put myself back together and continue. So, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Trump's challenges right now are, I mean, he's gonna probably win the nomination still because Republicans aren't doing anything to try to stop him. And they don't want to risk the political capital. They don't want to alienate their own voters by saying that this guy should rightly be imprisoned. And and then we hope he still has a 50-50 chance of winning the presidency. So that's the scary part. But if you believe polls, he is alienating swing voters and independents. So I think that's why you get someone like Nikki Haley desperately auditioning for vice president, so that and it's something I'm writing about for tomorrow, because she keeps running on the platform of Joe Biden is going to die, which is like grotesque. I know you're a very superstitious person, something you would never say out loud, but she keeps saying literally, come on. She asked George Stephanopoulos this, come on, no one thinks he's going to make it to another 4 years, which is just a horrible thing to say about any human being, but just that I believe that this man is going to die, and that'll make Kamala Harris president, and that is the worst thing ever. So what she's hoping for is that people will see it as a proxy battle between, say, her and Harris, and not the idea that both Biden and Trump.
Well, she would have a better time running against Biden than Harris, I would actually argue.
Well, yeah, but she's hoping that like a lot of the moderates who do, like a lot of never Trumpers, don't like Harris very much. They prefer Biden for many reasons that we will assume are consistent and not at all racially charged, to use the euphemism. But yeah, I think certainly if it's that proxy battle, you'll get some people who are like, okay, I hate Trump, but yeah, maybe he will die and go to jail, and then I'll be able to get all my evil Republican policies through Haley. I'll vote for Haley. And that's how she's sort of campaigning. The problem with her plan is that Trump thinks he's immortal, and Trump doesn't, after Pence, he will never trust anyone he believes is potentially, as he famously said, too honest. So everyone insists to me that Trump would make a wise choice. He's not going to choose a Marjorie Taylor Greene who would upstage him, or a Carrie Lake or whatever. But I think he's going to choose someone who is full on MAGA, who will take the bullet for him, and not someone he thinks would betray him. So I don't know. Haley has very little, I think, shot there. But I think a lot of the liberal prognosticators I've seen are obsessed with Haley. It's this weird thing of where there's a sort of breed of moderate Democrat who just finds that they're convinced that the candidate who can best win, who's a Republican, is someone they would most likely want to hang out with, which is just not how
Yeah, that's why they've always thought that Haley was like the one to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's just not, I don't know. I mean, I don't think she's going to get anywhere.
No, I don't, they don't like her. The MAGA people do not like her. Hold on, going back to one of these comments that we had. I would actually I don't like him as a human being, but I would argue, like, I mean, I don't think he has any shot, but I do think that Christie manages to be more charming than the rest. But also, I have my own prejudices because like his demeanor is very like familiar to me in a way that he is probably that demeanor is probably not as familiar to other people because of my background and where I'm from. So I would say like if anyone is, he is, but he also has no shot.
Yeah.
And he's not charming to those kinds of people, I don't think.
I mean, all politics is about the familiar. That's who you're voting.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
No one's
Because
making
people
rational choices. And it's sort of, that becomes a debate when people are sort of lecturing, and Democrats do this a lot, about lecturing about which candidate people should support. It's like, well, ultimately it comes down to you can't control people's biases, so they're going to choose. So to me, it's like, I don't know. It might suck to have the smartest person in the class have to be the chief of staff to someone who is very popular, but I kind of like having my constitutional rights. So if that's what it takes to win elections, I'm all for it. But I feel that there are a lot of people on the left who are just very obsessed with that. Like they more likely feel that Hillary was wronged than that people were actually hurt by Trump winning. It was more of like, the world is sexist and racist and we didn't get Hillary as president because of this, et cetera, as opposed to, yeah, the world is, it kind of was that way beforehand. It already was that way. So, and I hope you have a plan for winning that does not involve first curing racism and sexism.
Yeah, no, that unfortunately cannot be. Like, a lot of my issues with, like, with that particular view of things was like, oh, well, we can't do anything to, like, for a while, like during the 2016 like Democratic primary, it was, well, we can't do any of these things until we make people stop being sexist and racist, and that's like the first thing that we need to do. And I like, you can't necessarily do that, so like maybe we could have healthcare first, like I don't know. Like, it seems like an easier, like, it's not saying it's easier to do it legislative, but I think it's easier to legislate economic things than it is to just like make people better. Like, because human beings a lot of the time are very terrible.
Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah, I mean, he's MAGA to the core. Robin had written a kind of better known Vivek Ramaswamy piece last week, and he's terrible, but he is youth generation. He is the MAGA generation, and that's what young MAGA sounds like. And so it was very fascinating to see people like David French and Charlie Sykes and Tom Nichols feel like the best moment, the breakout moment for Haley was when she put him in his place.
Yeah, and you don't know foreign policy, but like young people also do not think that older politicians, and this is like across the board, have handled foreign policy very well as a rule. Like, anyone who lived through the Iraq War has some opinions on how maybe older politicians have handled foreign policy for like various reasons.
Well, and MAGA doesn't, I mean, they doesn't respond well to that. So of course, all the post-debate polls didn't necessarily sing for her from that moment. It was like a very it's targeted towards these never Trumpers. Sure, they like that, but it's not enough. It's not going to win you a primary. And I think it is useful also. I think she especially does not like Ramaswamy because he kind of does cut into her. Um, obviously Don Lemon was being very sexist. We talked about her being past her prime. But what was weird was her saying, as a 50-year-old in general, male, female, to say that I'm the new generation when you are
Yeah.
a 50. It's sort of saying, it's like being a 50-year-old rock star and saying that you need to stop going to REM and U2 concerts. These are 60-year-old men. I'm young and hip because I'm 50.
Yeah.
And then of course someone who's like 25 would be like, no, I think you're all old. So I think Ramaswamy represents that. He is obviously significantly younger, and I think he represents that sort of, yes, if you're talking about a new generation, that's it. I mean, her pushing a new generation, and she did this again when she
Well,
was talking
especially the
about.
trollishness, and that's why those young conservatives do love Trump, because he does emulate that, the young right wing trollishness, and that's what
Yes.
they are into, and they're not into, and like older ones too. Honestly, like at this point, like that has become very much their aesthetic.
Well, he's younger than
Yeah,
Trump was always sort of younger than Haley. So when Haley talks about age, arguably she is being more ageist than, because she's making it about a
yeah,
number. And so if you think about what young people do like, and this happened with like people complaining that, oh, well, we get why young people liked Obama over Hillary, but young people liking Sanders, it has to be sexism, not that he is hitting them on certain areas.
yeah,
Even stuff that they complained about. Well, he's attacking the establishment. Well, that is an appealing thing to
yeah.
younger people. So Trump
No
was
one's
someone
like,
who,
I mean, very few people. I always thought it was very weird when people were like, but the establishment is great. And I'm like, no one likes the establishment. That's the whole thing. No one's supposed to be pro establishment. That's weird. Like, sorry. Like,
well, I think there was the controversial statement of, well, he's attacking now and Planned Parenthood or the NAACP, and that's an establishment. And I think there has to be a distinction because, well, one, you can respect what institutions that have been around for a while have done, but again, you have to understand that young people do have a sense of not trust. Well, what has the
I've been to
establishment
literally one
achieved?
now meeting in my entire life, and I was like, it was like my friend's mom's. So like, yeah, no, they're not like super relevant, and they haven't been super relevant for a long time. I actually, there are some issues with Planned Parenthood that I, personally am not going to get into, but like, there are issues with like a lot of organization, like established organizations in general, as opposed to like, people who are like, oh, I'd like to see certain things get done now and without like as much baggage, perhaps,
Yeah,
like, and
which is what Trump did. Trump came in and was like, yeah, I'm not going to do the Reagan worship. Yeah, I didn't vote for Reagan, if he did, or I didn't vote. I've never consistently voted for Republicans. This is who I am. This is, he attacked McCain. He attacked
mhm,
Romney. And those are scuzzy. His attacking McCain and his being, that's a scuzzy thing. But it was viewed as he had the guts to do something that was seen as political suicide. I think
yeah,
people were even writing, including our beloved Wonkette. I was not here at the time. I remember an old article where it really was, Trump has finished his career. His political career is over because he's insulted John McCain's war record, because those are conventional, that these are things you don't
yeah,
do. And he
but
did
like,
it and endured. And so there's no one running who has and I hate to say guts because that's almost seeming to be complimenting him, but no one has, everything is very calculated. So it's like, yeah, Nikki Haley, if you're going to attack Vivek Ramaswamy, if you're going to attack trans people, Dylan Mulvaney, that's all very calculated and focus grouped. You haven't yet to do anything that is sort of like, Trump did, of like, yeah, Bush didn't keep us safe. Sorry, Jeb. He effed up on 9/11, and no one is doing that. And so I think they're revealing themselves to just be politicians.
yeah. I mean, I think even like Democrats were like, well, no, a lot of John McCain is off limits because, we're not going to go too hard on him because, we respect his service. And like, no, I will say, like, anyone who was a prisoner of war, like, yes, that was obviously a horrible thing. I'm never going to say that it wasn't. And I think that, saying I like people who didn't get captured was kind of fucked up to
Oh yeah,
some people who were, not necessarily wanting to be in war in the first place, especially in America. Like a lot of those people were in Vietnam. But at the same time, I think like Democrats vastly overestimated the amount that Republicans like John McCain and Mitt Romney, which was like for them, like not at all. Like they did not like them. And they even very much turned on George W. Bush, like after Iraq turned out very poorly. And so I think saying those things immediately actually like endeared him to a lot of people in a way that, the people who are very centered in DC and very like used to like, this is the way things are, did not see coming because they don't really pay attention to, like the comment section at Breitbart, which I unfortunately at that time spent a lot of time reading because I was like, I want to see how fucked up these people are.
yeah. I mean, you bothered to do that. I think a lot of folks don't. They read sort of it is from its own bubble of establishment type stuff, and it's not like looking into. It's always the warning, right? Like, don't read the comments. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, fine, but also don't be surprised by what happens when you don't read the comments. And everyone was shocked. It was sort of the idea of like, I think you and I have talked about this, the idea of where a lot of families, not particularly ours, because we're sort of different, obviously, in certain different ways, but a lot of families, particularly white liberals and their conservative families, have this idea of like, we don't talk politics. We'll just get together and, at holidays and talk about sporting events and movies and, very superficial dialogues and not talk about politics. And that's healthy. And then these are the same people who would then like swear up and down, oh, my Aunt Sissy, these guys are great. They're not going to vote for Trump because he's terrible. And I just know it. And I know they don't really believe these conspiracy theories about Obama or Hillary, but they did.
Yeah.
And what happened was you're not engaging. As I said, I talk politics with people because, well, also I like to give, I try not to have views that I would never express to someone to their face. I know that we've shared this with like, even internally amongst Democrats, the idea there'd be people who would have, okay, look, it's fine to not like Sanders. It's fine to not to like some of his supporters. But if you have this idea of what a Sanders supporter is, and then you can't express that to say you, who is one, then that makes it like, okay, well, you're allowing prejudice to develop without it being confronted. So it's the idea of like,
Gloria Steinem, right? And I could just be there for the boys.
Yeah, and people are saying all this like, oh,
she apologizes for her McMartin shit. So like, I will. That's when I will start listening to Gloria Steinem again. But
yeah, I mean, this whole thing that every bad choice is because of a guy, which is a weird thing she said, because it's sort of the idea of like a lot of sexist men would have the idea of when a man does something terrible, it's because of the woman in his life. And it's like such a lack of agency. It's like just sort of that, not like, well, I think she's young. It's like, oh, it's the idea of like, you can't really like this music. You're just trying to get a guy's attention. And it's so you can't really like this politician. And it's just a sort of very horrible thing to say about women. It's like, just, well, why not you actually trust, if you're a feminist, wouldn't you trust women? And like, oh, these are we need to do something to appeal to these women. I trust them, and somehow I'm not getting their support. But instead, I'm going to either say that they're just obsessed with dudes, or they're betraying other women.
I'm sorry, I spent enough time around like socialist and anarchist dudes, and there's like not a lot there. I'm kidding.
So we're almost at. We're almost at time here. If is there anything else you have? We're potentially going to go over and separately maybe talk about Jacksonville, but it depends on if you know what time zone you're in, and so we could figure out if that fits in your schedule. But I I didn't want to. I didn't want to tack that all into this particular one, but but as far as Trump, any final words about his mugshot?
I do think it's, rather amusing that he ended up making a fuck ton of money off of people buying his merchandise. So featuring his mugshot. So no reason why Wonkette should not also make a fuck ton of money off of merchandise featuring his mugshot. So go buy some of ours.
Yes, please do. I think that's available on our Merc site. You could have the entire set and for a full week or 2 weeks or so, keep drinking mugshots of indicted conspirators to try to overturn the government. Right. Thanks everyone for joining. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.